Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for attending this webinar. I'm introducing the first part, and I will point out the requirements that the digital COVID certificate links to with respect to the GDPR and regulation on data protection. Before starting, let me point out a short video by the audiovisual.ec.europa.eu, which synthesizes in 1 minute the essence of the EU digital COVID certificate, sometimes previously called the digital green certificate. I put the slides for you to go and check this video offline. But if I have to extract like the essence, some highlights from the video, the certificate is a digital proof. A digital proof for one having been vaccinated, or having been tested negative, or having recovered from the infection. And the fact that it's a digital proof means that it's a digitally verifiable certificate. It's a certificate that you can verify digitally using the device. And the verification is meant to prove authenticity of the certificate and integrity. So it's not being forged, it's not being transferred to anyone else, is valid. Here there is a workflow that I took it from uni.lu. If you are vaccinated, you are tested, or you recovered, you will receive a certificate, CovidCheck Certificate. In Luxembourg, you will receive it through this MyGuichet, at least through MyGuichet, let's say, personal account. You can also receive it by post or through the website of the laboratories that have been making the vaccination or the tests. There is a QR code in the certificate that you have to scan through an application, CovidCheck.lu, and the application will verify the authenticity of the certificate. You get answer green or red, depending on whether it's valid or not. The purpose of the certificate is to facilitate the free movement inside the EU member states and actually the European Economic Area plus Switzerland. That means that the country should not apply additional travel restriction unless they think it is necessary to safeguard the public health. In that case, they have to inform the other members, let's say officially, that they use it more additional than restriction than checking the certificate. It's not a precondition to travel. It will be used only in COVID-19 times until the World Health Organization would declare the pandemic over. It might be restored in future pandemic or, let's say, public health situations like this. There is a fact sheet in the website of the European Commission that I suggest you to look at. Here is the link with some essence, a bit more than the video. Again, let me highlight some important part. So the certificate will be in digital and in paper. It will contain a QR code, as we said, and the QR code indeed is a bit, let's say, it will be together with some personal information. We will see which one, and some metadata. And it contains a digital signature too. It will be free of charge in the sense nobody will be charged for getting the certificate. It will be safe and secure, and this is something that we will, I think Professor Ryan will give details about it. It will be written in a national language and in English, and it will be valid and verifiable all across the European member states, the economic area, and Switzerland. This means that there is a trust interoperability framework that all the member states will implement. The framework will have certain goals, which of course goes beyond the let's say the verifications, but also, for example, deciding who is the authorizing issuers, and maybe managing the certificates or relocate them, they have a validity, and also to analyze the legal implications of this, Europe-wide verification. This is another document that I point you out, which is a list of questions and answers from the European Commission. Is quite well detailed and go into, let's say, deeper detail than the fact sheets. And for the ones who want to know a bit more the technical part, this is the right document to look at. Let me now go to the core of my part, which is the GDPR principle that have been referred in the implementation of the certificates. There are certain principles that apply to the certificates, so the the document itself. And the first one is the limit of purpose, limit purpose of use. In the sense, there is a specific use that has been declared, the purpose for which this certificate will be used. It will be used for medical purposes, so for example, for checking whether someone has been vaccinated, even for second or shots of vaccination, but also for, they agreed, also for facilitate the free movement, as I said before. There may be other purposes, maybe the member state can, say, use the certificate for, and for example, Luxembourg will use it for enabling going to events, restaurants, and public, let's say, happenings. There is also another principle, which is data minimization. So the certificate will contain minimal personal identifiable information, which at least should be the name of the people, of the person, so first and family names, and date of birth. There is additional, let's say, information like the sex that can be implemented, but it's not mandatory. There will be also a unique vaccine identifier, certificate identifier. I switched, sorry, 2 letters, where there will be no personal information. This is a unique identifier that have to be used across all the members for, let's say, implementing the framework. And also there will be some metadata, basically about the certifier and the issuer, which will be also implemented in applying the data minimization principle. Here is the technical document that where all these say principles are described and commented. There are also principles that have been referred for what concerns the interoperability framework. This, of course, is something say more important because the certificates and the verification, it's actually quite a simple part. The most, let's say, critical is the implementation of the cross-border framework that allows the verification of the certificate across all the member states. Here, there is the principle that have been referred are the data protection data protection in general, that in particular is a data processing minimization. For example, the QR code verification has to be performed offline. So we know transfer of data through the internet. And also the data presented to the verifier, so the person who asks you to the proof of verification should be minimized. They also conceive different scenarios in which you may even hide certain information depending on the verification scenario. There is also the principle by design and by default. The security and privacy should be preserved or ensured against abuses from both sides. The person who presents the certificates for forgery, for example, or reuse, but also from let's say the verifiers, abuses from the verifiers. And there is the suggestion of not using, the demand of not collecting personal information to assure linkability. There is also the principle of inclusiveness, so no citizen should be left behind. That's why there is a paper version available together with the digital. And also the fact that the implementation should support a spectrum of certificate media so that there is no, let's say, problem of using different media and devices. I think the cross-border interoperability, I repeated, sorry, the items, but that is a part of actually of the usability. That should be work smoothly cross-border. And usability also another principle that has been explicitly mentioned. There should be no complex, not unnecessary functionality, and everyone should be using efficiently and quickly. There is also the reference to the principle of transparency, because they suggest to use open standard as much as possible for checking the implementation. So this is the essence. There are also another document that I point you out, which is the interoperability trust framework, where all the technical details of the implementation of the framework are reported and commented. In particular, I pointed the last document of the presentation, which is the communication of the press by the Minister of Health, the Minister of Digitalization, that last week they let's say declared the features of the implementation of the digital COVID certificate in Luxembourg. There are peculiarities, not that they diverge from what are of course the European suggestions. They declare explicitly, because it's one of the duties they have to to state the vaccines that are accepted for being certified. There is also a timeline of validity of the certificates, the tests that are accepted for certifications, and also specifics about the recovery. And who will issue the certificates will be the vaccination centers and the laboratories. And the laboratories can also deliver through their portal if they have one. Otherwise, they necessarily have to provide the certificate also through the MID share. And there are also other people authorized, if they are authorized, to release the certificate. So I think that I hand my part here, and I leave the floor to Professor Rani. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to participate in this. Well, Gabriele has already covered quite a lot of the ground, so let me see what I can add a little bit more on, I guess, the more technical security aspects. Well, as Gabriele already mentioned, there will be sort of three categories covered by these certificates. So whether you've been vaccinated, whether you've had a recent, presumably negative PCR test, and whether you've recovered at some point, had COVID and recovered from it. As far as I know, nobody is entirely sure what guarantees these sort of states provide in terms of the possibility you might still be transmit COVID, but I guess the general feeling is that it's significantly lowered. Gabriele already mentioned the information included. I don't think there's much I can add to that. Obviously, the name will be there, date of birth. There's a unique certificate number, some optional things like maybe a personal ID of some kind, which might be your passport number or your national health number or something. Gender is also optional. And then, of course, well, depending which category you're in, there'll be sort of additional information like the dates and type of vaccination and so on and so forth. Okay, so all of that's sort of fairly natural. So just to talk very briefly about the technical details, and in a way that I'm not sure there's an awful lot to say about this because it's kind of a bit unremarkable and unsurprising. A fairly sort of minimal solution, kind of the first thing that any decent security expert would have come up with. And at the heart of it, of course, is, as Gabriele mentioned, digital signatures. So whatever data is included in the certificate will be included in a digital signature, which is then embedded in a QR code of some form. I don't know whether most people in the audience probably fairly familiar with the notion of digital signatures. Maybe I should spend just sort of 30 seconds to say. And this is something which became possible with the advent of public key cryptography, when people basically discovered that you could have two pairs of keys associated with either encryption or signatures. So you can have a public signature for, say, encryption and a corresponding decryption secret key. And the public key, obviously, you can publicize. And the key point is that it should be intractable to derive the secret decrypting key, in this case, from the public key. But then people very quickly realize you can actually flip this around. You can use this kind of trickery not just for encryption, for secrecy, but you can also use it to try and guarantee authentication by introducing this notion of digital signature. So now the idea is that there's a secret signing key, which the owner can then use to take a digital document and sign it in this fashion. And then anybody who has access to the corresponding public verification key can run an algorithm which verifies that the document really was signed by the owner of the signing key, and the contents of the document weren't changed in any way from the original signing. So obviously we don't have time to go into the technical details of how that works. As I understand it, there are two such algorithms, fairly standard, well-established algorithms that are proposed for use, primarily an elliptic curve algorithm, ECDSA, or there is also mentioned, seemingly as a sort of fallback or option, an RSA-based signature. It seems likely that it will be primarily the elliptic curve one which will be used. The point about elliptic curves is you can achieve comparable security for much smaller sort of keys and data sizes. So the signature, for example, is much easier to fit onto a QR code. The RSA signatures are much larger and harder to fit into a typical QR code. So wherever you've got public keys, you need some kind of public key infrastructure. So here again, the sort of architecture, if you like, the solution they're proposing is fairly natural. Each country will generate its own keys for these digital signatures, store them. Presumably, what it appears the proposal is they'll be stored, the secret signing keys will be stored centrally, presumably in the case of Luxembourg by the Luxembourg Health Authority. Then, of course, if this is to work across pan-European style, you need a mechanism for countries to share their public keys, so that when you migrate to another country, your certificate from, say, Luxembourg can be verified in Germany or whatever. So there is a mechanism. Again, won't go into the details here. There's a URL if anybody wants to look closer. It's a gateway which allows a secure mechanism for exchanging these public keys. So in Germany, they can be assured that the public key they have is the genuine public key for the Luxembourg Health Authority. And I think Gabriele also mentioned that, well, the idea is that these certificates will be available in paper form, but also in digital form on, say, smartphones. So there is code which will allow you to upload your QR code and so on onto your smartphone. As I understand it, typically, if you are presenting such a thing, you would then have to present some other form of ID, to show that you are the owner. You match the name of the person on the certificate. Okay. So, well, the design seems sort of very natural. Seems to be basically sound. It uses well-tested cryptographic primitives like the EC elliptic curve signatures that I mentioned. So at least at the high level, it seems like it should be secure. It should be certainly hard to forge such certificates, at least in theory. Of course, with crypto, a lot can go wrong between theory and implementation. And of course, we haven't yet had a chance to look at the implementation. But it's also worth mentioning that they are open to trying to make it compatible with solutions elsewhere across the globe. In particular, some solutions being developed by the UN and the World Health Authority. Perhaps worth mentioning in passing that there is no encryption. This is purely signature, so this is purely for authentication. So there's no real attempt to try and keep this information secret in any sense. And I also just mentioned in passing that also there's no attempt to make this quantum resistant. So if large-scale quantum computers become a reality, then the crypto here will be broken. But that's maybe something that they'll worry about in due course. I mean, I guess this is something that they've want to roll out fairly quickly. So some well-established primitives and so on, it makes sense to use those. Maybe we can worry about quantum resistance at a later stage. So I think I mentioned the signing keys will be centralized, as we understand it, which potentially causes perhaps bottlenecks. But on the other hand, it does mean that there's only one place where the keys can, in a sense, be compromised. So there's nothing fancy. I mean, potentially they could have gone for minimal disclosure protocols, anonymous verifiable credentials. Actually, Gabriele, I think, said that these are unlinkable. I mean, technically, from a crypto point of view, they are linkable, but I think Gabriele's point is that the sort of procedures in place, that the certificates would just be verified in situ, offline, and without any information about that verification being then stored or communicated means that in effect that these certificates, when they pop up, shouldn't be linked. So maybe it's they're linkable, but hopefully not linked. So which is presumably quite good from a privacy point of view. Okay, so I think I'm pretty much done. I'm probably at the limit of the time I have. So let me just say quickly, I got some help from some members of the APSIA, in particular the Smart Exit team. We had a little project, one of these FNR Smart Fast Track projects on COVID. In particular, Marian Skrobot did quite a lot of background. Oops, I think I misspelled his name. There should be a K in there, sorry. He did quite a lot of background checking on the technical details, which have helped inform these slides. One remark in passing, people are pointing out, please do regard the information on these certificates as quite sensitive. So apparently there are already people who've been photographing these and posting them on their social media, Facebook and so on. That is not a terribly good idea, so we advise you don't do that. Okay, so I think I'm done. And I think we can move over to questions and discussion, right?
Thank you very much, Professor Ryan, for your presentation as well. So we had a couple of questions. The first question goes around how long will the certificates be in place? Will it be only during the time of the pandemic, or after the pandemic, how will the data be deleted actually?
Now that's a good question, Gabriele. Did you look at that?
Okay, so the of course the implementation is still right. It will be say, valid from the 1st of July, but the data of limiting the purpose, at least in principle, the data should be used until the World Health Organization would declare the pandemic over. Okay, so that is the limit. In terms of, let's say, deleting the data, this is my personal opinion, say, now on the fly. Since there is no personal data stored, but on the, in case of Luxembourg, there might be shades of something personal of the user, it's up to the person, and you can delete your document from MyBShare if you want, right? So it's, but definitely there is no storage, no transmission of personal data on servers, okay, in the interoperability framework. In terms of unlinkability, maybe this one also related to this one. Of course, I was referring to the requirements. I'm reading what they say in the document of the Trust Framework Interoperability Certificates. They say that the design should prevent the collection of identifiers and other similar data that might be cross-referenced, okay, with other data and reuse for tracking. So this is a requirement that they suggest, okay, in the implementation of the framework. I don't know if I've answered the question.
Well, the person will come back to us if in case
okay.
It's not clear.
Thank you.
There is another question actually with regards to how to download the application, the CovidCheck.lu application. It seems that you have to pass by Google or Apple to be able to download the application. So that means that you must be a customer of Google or Apple, or how does that work?
Peter, you wanted to say something? This is actually if you have an Android phone or an iPhone, then the application that are certified by those, let's say, entities, they should be downloaded through their, let's say, stores. Okay, so this is actually the guarantee of the application being not hiding any malware or secret code or backdoors. So that's how it works when you download application, depending on the platform and the device that you have.
Yeah. And I mean, some people will just stick to the paper, I guess, if they don't have either a smartphone or accounts on.
Right. The fact that the device, the application, the CovidCheck.lu is for verifying, right, the QR code. I also have I know that, like, of course, I'm not sharing my my certificate, but if you want, I can show you how it look like in paper. If you let me share, so this will maybe give us some more tangible. But I need to be allowed to share my content.
I'm sorry, I will give you the rights now. You should be able to.
Not yet, maybe.
Is this better now?
Yep, now it's better. Screen. Here it is. Let me see if I see it. Yeah, so I'm showing nothing that you know already, my name and maybe information about the COVID vaccine that I received, which is so this is how it look like in paper. And who is receiving in paper are people that have been vaccinated before the 10th of June, when the digital, let's say, framework has been implemented since the communication of press last week. So there are look like the front one page that describes something, and then you have the vaccination certificate that says when I've been vaccinated, where, using which vaccine, and the prophylaxis. And so this is the technical information about the vaccine. And then here there is a QR code, which is the certificate that need to be validated with this minimal information. So my name, my family name, my first name, the date of birth, and the unique identifier of the certificate. And then if you if you have this CovidCheck application, what it does is ask you to scan the certificate. So you scan the QR code, okay? And when you scan the QR code, you get green if the certificate is valid, and it repeats, okay, the information that you have in the certificate. This is what you have to show as a proof of validation. As Peter said, certain authority may ask you also an ID to checking whether it's really you, the person with the surname and forename there. And that's it. One people in the audience ask where you can find a digital version. As far as I've read, it should be in MyGuichet, as in your account of myguichet.lu. But I haven't checked it myself. What I check it that is not, for example, in the portal of the labs that usually I'm using, or not even in my DSP. So I don't know if there will be some time before it will be there. But according to what I've read from the document, it should be visible in my issue, maybe within a certain time, if it will be possible. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. There is another question with regards to data protection during the verification phase. Is the verification done fully locally? That meaning that there is no checking of in a central database or something like that, if we understand it correctly? That's the
understanding is that it's purely local. I mean, all you need to do to verify the certificate is to have a copy of the public key, the verification key. So I don't know the exact details, but I guess the authorities at borders or whatever will have devices, readers, which will have the public key loaded onto them, so it can be done purely locally. Is that forward with your understanding, Gabriele?
Yeah. What I know that there will be a database, but of the, let's say, issuer, okay? So their public key. And with your device, you will regularly, let's say, download the public key of the issuers, okay? Just to have it on your phone, so that when you do the check of the QR code, everything is logged. Okay?
Perfect.
So it's no personal data of the user, of the patients, are data of the certifiers and the issuers of the certificate, because you need to have their public key on your device. So you regularly update from these databases across Europe, and then you can, in this way, you can use completely offline the checking of the certificate on your phone. This is what I read in one of the documents. I don't remember exactly which one.
Another question concerns the limitations in terms of storage of data. Are there any limitations, or we are good to cover the whole world with CovidCheck certificates?
I'm not sure if I understood the
Yeah.
question. Let me read it from the chat.
Yeah, well, it was a private question actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's how much information you can store in a QR code?
Yes.
Mm,
Or how much information can be stored in the cloud?
Storage. I'm not sure we're storing this in the cloud. I hope we're not. And these QR codes should be
Maybe
rich
that
enough
needs
to
to
be
be.
able to carry the data that we described plus the digital signature. And they are big enough to do that, at least with elliptic curves. So I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, well,
Do we
yes.
have enough unique numbers to cover everyone in the globe or something? I'm not sure I quite understand the
Yeah, I guess
question.
that was the question. Maybe the question, the information was not understood well, but you certainly.
Yeah. 1 second. Maybe I can interpret what you say. So if you are talking about the unique certificate identifier, there are actually rules to how to compose this identifier of the certificate. And of course, one of the requirements that should be large enough to cover all the members of the European of Europe and economic area, we say people. Okay, but there are rules for that, and they also try to minimize the information. According to, I don't know the current implementation, but it could be a combination also of the metadata that exist in the certificates. In one of these documents, there are, let's say, the possibility that they are suggesting, because the European Commission is also supporting the member state to implement, giving them a bit of freedom. And there are different, I think, 4 suggestions. All of them try to minimize the data, even in composing the unique vaccination certificate identifier.
Thank you. And there is another question with regards to GDPR data protection. How is this compliant to data protection? Can you maybe again walk us through the compliance with the GDPR regulation?
It's one for you, Gabriele.
Yeah, that's of course, it's not up to me to say that something is compliant. If I have learned, is that is the law deciding that, and of course for the maybe within the EU there is the data protection officer that might be the most entitled to answer. But of course, the principle that I pointed out in my presentation are principles that are linked or inspired by principles that are in the GDPR. So if the member state implement those principles according to the suggestions of the technical documents, they might be having at least an argument for compliance. The presumption of compliance, I've learned, is the technical term.
Thank you. Another question. If I understand correctly, the CovidCheck will be used throughout Europe in compliance with GDPR. However, how will this work for travelers or visitors from non-EU countries? Can a non-resident receive a Luxembourg CovidCheck certificate for use within Europe? Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I mean, there is hope, I think, to try and integrate the mechanisms in Europe with those beyond Europe. So if someone comes in from, say, the UK or something, with presumably a certificate from the UK, then hopefully once they've managed to get the integration working, it should be possible to recognize that using the public key mechanism within Europe. And otherwise, I don't know if the question is if you have some kind of proof of vaccination and you want to acquire one of these credentials in Europe. I'm not quite sure. In principle, it should be possible to do that as long as you have a reasonably good credential mechanism coming from abroad. Do you want to add something, Gabriele, or don't?
Yeah, I don't remember by heart, and so I just say something because I remember from the documents. But they say that, of course, if you are, a resident, not maybe having the nationality, okay, European nationality, you can have the certificate. So there are regulations that cope with the situation. Someone which is not the citizens of the European member states, but is a resident and can, yeah.
I have a certificate, and I'm not.
And
I'm a Brit.
in terms of, let's say, flexibility and interoperability even across other, let's say, countries that the one of the Europe zone, I think the framework has been designed, was being conceived to be extendable. So at least they have thought ahead that there might be in the future a larger interoperability.
I mean, in principle, it's technically fairly straightforward. You just need to kind of extend this gateway mechanism to allow other countries outside Europe to recognize European public keys and conversely.
I think that the technical, what I maybe guessed, what is the technical difficulty is really the trust of the issuers. So the management of the public keys of the entities that are authorized to release the certificate. And this one within Europe has been harmonized. And that's when you have to go, let's say, link with other frameworks, then probably you have to do some work. Yeah.
Perfect. I don't see any other questions. Well, there was a question with regards to cross-border workers. Will the certificate be requested in Luxembourg for cross-border workers from France, Germany, and Belgium? But I guess...
under what circumstances, I suppose?
well, I guess this person is asking about whether he will receive a certificate here in Luxembourg, whereas maybe the answer is that a resident will receive a certificate in his home country where he got vaccinated, right?
Presumably, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I was reading the chat. I missed part of the question, but you received the certificate from the country where you are resident, right? And then if you cross the border, there other countries might have their own verifier, okay? Mm-hmm. And which, however, should implement the principle in such a way should be able to verify your QR code. So that is the interoperability say, feature, that you have a certificate from your own country, you go somewhere else, and then within the EU zone, Switzerland, then their application should be able to verify your QR code.
Yes. So basically, the information to remember is that you will get the certificate in your home country, and you can take it with you wherever you go in Europe for the moment, and use it and prove the fact that you got vaccinated, or the other two options that
exactly.
Yeah. Great. There is one question that just came through. What prevents a verifier from storing all QR codes it sees? Very technical.
Well, I mean, I think the answer to that is just procedures. I mean, technically speaking, there isn't really anything to prevent the verifier storing QR codes they see. But as I understand it, the hope is that the procedures will be such that they're not stored. Once the verification is performed, the data is, I guess, deleted. But technically, there's nothing really to prevent storage, as far as I can see. Are you aware of anything else, Gabriele?
Well, in the sense, the developer of the application, of course, is follow the principle of the open standard, maybe even open source, okay, then you can verify whether the application is behaving as it should. And the fact that maybe it's sell through the Apple Store or the Google Store is also a certain guarantees that as far as it is valid, it's not a malicious application. Okay? So it's the application developed by the countries, members. So of course, there are entities responsible for that. For example, for Luxembourg is the CPIE that implement application without, say, compliantly with the regulation. So it doesn't store anything. Okay? But of course, I imagine, I don't know, a fraudulent person that pretend to be a verifier and just take a picture, that's, of course, it's nothing to do, however, with the guidelines of the application. Just a person try to fraud and take a picture of their phone, like you can steal your wallet, and it's outside the the discussion. But there should be control. I think that the entities who develops the application are accountable, not towards the law and the European regulation framework too, legal framework too.
Great, thank you. I think we have responded all the questions now. So I would like to thank both of you again for taking the time to walk us through this topic today, and a topic that will certainly shape our lives in the next few months. Now, let me all invite you for another topical webinar on CovidCheck certificates with a focus on legal and socio-ethical aspects with Professor Poilot, full professor of civil law at the FDEF, and Professor Chauvel, full professor of sociology at the FHSC. Join us on Monday, 28th of June at midday again, and we will certainly have an interesting discussion too. Thank you very much. I wish you have a good day, and see you next time for another webinar or a meeting.